So hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this session with Kim from Smartbox on AAC support for educators. And over to you, Kim.
Thank you very much. Yeah, hello everyone. So my name's Kim. I am the product manager for education at Smartbox Assistive Technology. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a fairly new product. It was just released in September last year, called Grid for Schools. So if you're aware of us and grid software, you might sort of know a little bit about this already, but we'll dive straight in. So what is Grid for Schools then? So Grid for Schools, as I said, we launched in September, and it is a complete package which includes grid software. So that's Grid 3 or Grid for iPad, so Windows or iOS. It includes content within the grid software itself, training for all staff, also that's open to parents as well, and resources that are able to be used in conjunction with grid, and also ongoing support as well. So like I say, it is a package that is around the software itself. The idea is that obviously this package can support all learners. So again, thinking about, a lot of schools, certainly schools that I used to work in, the age range was 3 to 19, lots of different levels. So this package, this resource, everything supports pre-verbal or fluent symbol or text communicators. So we support everybody's communication journey wherever they are on that journey. So for example, a student who's learning to make choices within grid, we can start with really simple sort of yes and no, all the way through to students that are using text-based AAC. So it's a nice thing that within one package, within one software, you're able to suit all learners. And then finally, it's that whole school approach. So we know that AAC shouldn't just be limited to one classroom, one incredibly enthusiastic teacher. The idea is that Grid for Schools, that package supports communication across the entire school environment. So every classroom, playgrounds, dinner hall, any shared spaces, but also equally as important at home as well. So that relationship between school and home. Yeah, so that is what is Grid for Schools. Now, why Grid for Schools, you may ask. So a lot of you potentially will be familiar with challenges that schools can face. Certainly we've had feedback, we've been in communication with a lot of schools for many years who've been using grid in really innovative ways. And these are some of the challenges that schools face currently and have faced in the past. So lack of training for staff, so that is in general, but it's also things around what sort of staff turnover. You might do one load of training and that's great, but then sadly, we know that in schools that staff turnover can be quite high, so that inconsistency in training, a limited access to robust AAC, or even potentially inconsistent AAC access again. So lots of different softwares, lots of different things across the school, but sometimes limited. And then finally, sort of the inconsistency of implementation. So if it is inconsistent across a school, it is so much harder for students who need that structured support to get access to it. So how does Grid for School help with these sort of common issues? We've got that whole school approach consistency. So every teacher, teaching assistant, support staff member knows how to use AAC with Grid for Schools. We've got a whole training package. We've got all the resources. We've got that consistent support there for everybody. Ready-made resources for easy implementation. Time is just something that educators really just don't have, and we really understand that, and have worked closely with a number of educators to kind of really understand what is it that would be really helpful for you to have alongside the software. So for example, one of the resources that we have that you get as soon as you order is an implementation guide, and it's a bit of a Bible. It's a really chunky document, but everything you could ever possibly need to know or reference or think about is within that implementation guide. And then finally, ongoing training and support so that you feel confident in using AAC. It is very much a package that is there to hold your hand for as long as you need your hand holding and beyond. So that constant training, that constant support, again, I referenced, staff turnover, staff changes, classroom changes. You might be with younger years and then move to older years. Like, all of that training and all of that support is included in that package. So going a little bit more in depth, so these are the sort of 4 sections where hopefully, if I've got enough time at the end, we can chat a bit more about. But so training and support, arguably the most important thing, bar the software itself. So we do have our online learning platform, Smartbox Academy. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, I thoroughly recommend taking a look at that regardless of this product. So we host our school specific training on Smartbox Academy. So a school is given a bespoke code to enter in, and then every staff member's dashboard is populated with what we've called a 5-step learning plan. So it's a structured way to learn all about, the basics of AAC, all the way through to sort of complex editing on grid and thinking about access methods and things like that. So as a standard, a school gets a 5-step learning plan. However, we also offer a multitude of other courses based on your particular needs. So when you speak to your local Smartbox specialist about getting grid for schools, you could have a conversation and say, we've got, a number of different access methods at our school, and in particular, we really need upskilling on eye gaze. So what we would do is, on top of that 5-step learning plan, we would also place all of our eye gaze based courses as well. So like I say, as a standard, you get that, but as part of the communications, we really bespoke that training to you. So the other thing about that is, obviously, it is on our platform, so it absolutely can be self-paced. You can come and go and do it as you please. A lot of schools who have purchased grid for schools currently use inset days, so they're like, right, everybody, let's all log on. We'll all, do step 1 of the 5-step learning plan on this implementation day, inset day, or, another training day. Or if you've got sort of a twilight, things like that, you're like, right, okay, we're all going to sit down and do the eye gaze one, and so on. So it really is, it varies. And again, if you've got speech and language therapists, if you're fortunate enough to have one in-house in your school, again, the sort of more bespoke courses that maybe would be more appropriate for that SLT. So again, all of that is very bespoke to your school and to your needs. As I said, implementation guide, ongoing guidance, that sort of relationship with your local Smartbox specialist, and then lots of other things, such as our Smartbox hub, where we've got a whole bunch of sort of guides, paper guides and things like that. Next up, grid software. Fairly self-explanatory, but it is a robust AAC platform. We also support multiple access methods to suit different needs. So depending on, again, the needs of your students, as part of that conversation, we work out what is best. We do have Windows or iOS. The Windows one does support various access, all access needs, but it is really robust. We've got pre-populated grid sets, vocabularies, etc. So that is the software. Content and resources. So this is sort of more school-based stuff. So we have got pre-made customizable grid sets. So if you do have access to grid, you can access them already without even buying into grid for schools. That's something we felt very strongly about, people having access to these grid sets. So if you go add grid set, education, grid for schools, you'll be able to see some of what we've currently got. And then, of course, we've got our flagship vocabularies as well available. But those grid sets are customizable. They're meant to be there to sort of inspire you and think, oh, we could totally use this for this lesson instead, and go in and edit it to your own needs and your own student needs. It's also super important for me to say, arguably should have said it before, but this product is constantly in development. So we are actively working on new training modules that are suitable for schools, new content suitable for schools, which you should see hopefully next month, the next batch coming out, and same with resources. Printable low techs, again, thinking, you know, straight off the bat, you want to implement Grid for Schools. One of the first things you could do to tick a box is print off a load of low techs and get them around the school, and you're already at a great advantage there that you're beginning to implement AAC. So again, we're not just thinking about the software and what's available in the software, we're also thinking about, right, okay, if you know, you can make your own printable resources, but let's give you a whole bunch that you can get started with it straight away. And then finally, one really, really important thing that you will hear me talk about often is that whole school approach. So we want to provide you with sort of strategies to ensure that AAC is embedded across the school setting. This is not just in your classroom. We want to create that really inclusive environment. So we're thinking core word posters everywhere possible, devices, iPads up on the interactive whiteboard. That idea that we can have that whole school approach so that AAC is absolutely everywhere for every student. So how schools use Grid for Schools. As I said earlier, Grid for Schools has been out since September. So we're really, really fortunate that we've had a lot of early takers on Grid for Schools, and the amount of stuff we've learned already has been incredible. Equally, one of the biggest reasons that we created Grid for Schools was because we knew schools were already using Grid in their classrooms in really innovative ways, and we really wanted to be able to support the work that they're doing. So these are just sort of some examples of how schools are using Grid in their schools. So embedding communication into daily routines. So that could be things like, we're starting the morning with a grid set where we're talking about what's coming up in the day. Could be a core word of the week that we're exploring, things like that. We've got Grid on different devices, so again, dependent on what your school has. If you do have a whole bunch of iPads, got kids on iPads all interacting with the same grid set within a lesson, using something like Supercore to discuss topics, things like that. Interactive whiteboards, again, which is something that we've seen is really, really popular, to have communication right up front and centre that students are able to interact with. And then, of course, dedicated AAC devices. So again, those students who have got dedicated devices are seeing their peers, are seeing their teachers, their TAs all using the same system, and there's that continuity for them as well. Printing low-tech visuals to help support communication beyond devices. Again, referenced that before, but how incredible would it be to exit your classroom with the interactive whiteboard where you've got Supercore on, to see then Supercore low-techs readily available, some bespoke grid sets that you've created with that week's menu on, within the dining hall, playground related core, etc. So having low tech available when those devices aren't available. A really nice example of a school that are using Grid in exactly the way that we would dream for every school to be able to have access to is one called Oasis Academy. If you Google Oasis Academy Smartbox, I would have thought that their case study will come up, but that is a really nice one as an example. Sadly, I don't have time to show you that today, but I think it would be great if you guys are interested. So, as I said, it came out in September. Fantastic feedback to really drive this product forward for us. So these are some of the reasons why schools have chosen Grid for Schools. So supports all students at any stage of communication. Obviously, I have already said that, but I do think it's really helpful to reiterate that point, that Grid, if you are not familiar with it, it really is something that you can make what you want from it. So as I said, sort of that early emerging, very sort of simple symbols, basic requests, anything like that early on, all the way through to text to speech for longer conversations, things like that. That is all within that one software. you don't have to go from one to another to another to another to achieve the things that you want to achieve for your students, regardless of where they are on their communication journey. Secondly, helps with funding applications. So this was one of the key reasons that Oasis Academy invested in Grid for Schools. So they were really keen for their students to meet NHS criteria for devices. And so by building up those skills as a whole school approach, they've seen a fantastic uptake in their applications being successful for students to get their own devices funded. So again, sort of embedding that communication within the school day has built up those students' skills, which has then meant when they're assessed that they are deemed able to get funding for devices. Next, works across devices and includes low-tech options. So as I said, Windows, so that if you've got Windows tablets, if your laptops are Windows, your whiteboards are Windows, etc., you've got Grid 3 for those devices. If you have iPad, we do have Grid for iPad. But then also you can print from Grid. We've recently, just sort of the back end of last year, improved our printing capabilities within Grid. So again, if you've got Grid and you haven't explored that, certainly do. But, you know, if you're thinking, awesome, I want to do that whole school approach, and yes, we have got sort of a stock number of core boards and things like that you can download straight away, but actually I want to make something bespoke to my school and the environment that my students are in, that you're able to really quickly create something, print that off, laminate it and get it everywhere. So again, one software that's able to do all of those things is always a win. Next, encourages independence and engagement. So giving students a voice and the tools to use it confidently. You know, this is so important. We really want to encourage our students to be independent, and by working with software like Grid, we are able to do that. We can put bespoke grid sets together alongside our flagship core, and giving them the ability to self-advocate, use symbol supported resources and things like that is such a huge thing that we really encourage as part of Grid for Schools. And then finally, training and ongoing support. So obviously that's been a huge one. Pricing and things like that is something you would discuss with our Smartbox specialist, because every school, depending on how many licenses, etc., would be a bespoke sort of quote for you. But I do think it's really important to say that with Grid for Schools, technically, all you are paying for is the software. Everything I've referenced, all the training, the bespoke resources, implementation, the content, etc., is all included in that price, because we understand that in order for you to succeed with Grid within your school, you need that support, and that shouldn't be, you know, price oriented. So yeah, all of that within the cost is included. So training, huge thing. Having access to Smartbox Academy is really valuable. You're able to learn at your own pace, but also we do offer sort of bespoke in school training in the UK, because we are able to, but that is an additional price. So training, ongoing support is a no-brainer, and it's something that's huge for schools. So I'm just going to delve really quickly into sort of some of the content that is currently available, some of the resources, and then just breaking down the training a little bit. I know I've not got too much time, and I do want to leave a little bit for any questions. But so yeah, we have got some content. We're already developing the next group of content, which hopefully will be out either the end of February, the beginning of March. But we've got content around sort of writing, literacy and reading, numeracy and maths, daily routine and positive behaviour support. So again, if you have Grid, I really encourage you to take a look. So you go to Add Grid Set, Education, Grid for Schools, and then you can take a look from there. We've got resources, and again, building on these resources already, and we should see some more soon. So we've got the goals evaluation and planning toolkit and the goals framework. So and none of this is prescriptive. You don't have to use these things, but they're just there in the hope that they'll be helpful for you. So the goals framework guide is really for schools who potentially have limited access to speech and language therapy. So this has been developed as a thing to use with individual students to look at their daily routine, weekly routine, identify areas for communication, and then really look at unpicking that. What's great about that? What could we improve? How could we help this student? So both of those documents support each other. The implementation guide, as I referenced already, the Bible of how you would implement grid within your school. Activity guides, so these are linked to Supercore Learning. So every Supercore Learning word, so for example, bubbles, we could pick up the activity guide and be like, right, okay, we're concentrating on bubbles or Lego or, you know, Mr. Potato Head. And it gives a really good sort of structured lesson for you to be able to support the communication within that lesson. So again, thinking teachers are really low on time, TAs are low on time. What can we do to really help you embed communication within your lessons? Really start looking at things like Supercore, and it's something really quick to pick up and run with. And then we have got other AAC resources, things like a guide to modelling for people who are potentially new to using AAC and more. And then finally, the 5-step learning plan. So this just shows you what is there as standard. So we've got intro to AAC in the classroom. So neither of those are product based. They're just giving you an introduction to what is AAC, and then what types of AAC can you use in the classroom. So that does cover things like Big Mac switches and other things as well. Then we go into the grid learning pathway. So that's where we're like, right, okay, let's really learn about the software we're trying to implement in our school. We then go on to using grid as a classroom tool. And then here, module 2, this is a touch point for our for the support team, essentially, for the team that you'll be speaking with. So that one is an online session that you can have with a one-to-one with a Smartbox specialist. So that's a really nice point to check in and really chat through anything that you potentially are struggling with or any questions that you may have. And then finally, creating classroom grids. So that really is, right, okay, here's how you can use all the incredible commands within grid to make something very bespoke for your students. So that is a whirlwind tour of grid for schools. Hopefully that all makes sense. But if anybody has any questions, please do go ahead.